Who's actually going to get the most out of a 10 horsepower, 120-gallon two-stage compressor? Is it worth the investment for a weekend hobbyist? Or does it belong in a shop that lives and breathes metalwork every day? And if you're just looking for a tool to keep your car tires topped off, does spending this kind of cash make sense? Those are the questions that keep most buyers up at night, especially when the catalog description reads like a sales brochure and the price tag feels like a commitment. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I first started digging into air compressors, the biggest fear I ran into was buying something that sounded perfect on paper, but turned out to be a nightmare in the real world: oversized, noisy, or impossible to maintain. A 10 horsepower unit promises power, but that power can also mean a bigger footprint, higher electricity draw, and a louder work environment. The risk is especially real for people who have a limited garage or who don't have a dedicated electrical circuit. That's why I spent a few days reading through forums, watching a handful of shop floor videos, and comparing the specs of a few similar models before I even thought about hitting add to cart. The goal was to see whether the promises of long life and maximum power and flexibility actually translate into something you can rely on day after day. Let's start with the basics of the category. In the world of air compressors, a two-stage design means the motor first pushes air into a small intermediate tank, then forces it into the main storage tank at a higher pressure. The result is typically higher final PSI, more consistent airflow, and less heat buildup compared to a single-stage unit. For anyone who runs spray painting, pneumatic tools, or a tire inflation station, that consistency can be the difference between a smooth finish and a job that stalls halfway through. The 120-gallon tank size adds a buffer, meaning you can run a grinder or a nail gun for longer stretches without the motor cycling on and off constantly. Now, why does the 2545 E10V stand out among its peers? The first thing I noticed was the long life claim, which is backed up by a heavy-duty cast-iron pump and a well-ventilated motor housing. In practical terms, that means the unit can handle the kind of continuous duty cycles you see in a small auto body shop. Think 30 minutes of spray painting followed by another 30 minutes of impact wrench work without overheating. I watched a YouTuber who runs a full-time restoration garage. He ran this compressor for 3 straight hours while sanding, welding, and painting, and the temperature gauge never crept above the safe zone. That kind of durability is something you can actually feel when you're on the job, because you won't be forced to shut down every time the motor starts to whine. Maximum power and flexibility isn't just marketing fluff either. The 10 horsepower motor delivers a respectable 8 CFM at 90 psi and 12 CFM at 40 psi, which means you can drive a heavy-duty impact wrench and a spray gun at the same time without the pressure sag you get with a smaller unit. In a real-world scenario, imagine you're inflating a fleet of delivery vans and need to run a sandblaster on a nearby panel. With a single-stage, 5 horsepower compressor, you'd probably have to pause one task while the other runs. This two-stage, 10 horsepower beast lets you keep both going, shaving off minutes that add up over a busy day. Serviceability is another practical angle. The manufacturer designed the pump with removable covers and accessible oil ports, which is a huge time saver if you're the type who does their own maintenance. In the video I saw, the owner popped the oil plug, drained the old oil, and refilled it in under 5 minutes, all while the unit was still mounted on a steel stand. No need to bring the whole thing down to a shop, which is a real cost saver for a small operation that can't afford downtime. Reliability, of course, is the final piece of the puzzle. The unit carries a 2-year warranty, which is fairly standard for industrial-grade compressors, but still reassuring when you consider the upfront cost. In the few reviews that did appear on the retailer's site, users highlighted that the motor kept humming smoothly even after a year of heavy use. That consistency is what you need when you're pulling a batch of parts from a CNC mill and can't afford a sudden loss of pressure mid-cut. So who should buy this? If you run a professional shop, a small manufacturing line, or you're an avid DIYer who tackles big projects like building a custom motorcycle, renovating a historic home, or maintaining a fleet of service vehicles, this compressor fits like a glove. The combination of tank size, airflow, and two-stage pressure means you can keep multiple tools alive at once, which directly translates into productivity. It also makes sense for anyone who does a lot of spray painting or sandblasting. The consistent PSI prevents atomization issues that can ruin a finish. Finally, if you have a dedicated 240V circuit in a garage that can accommodate a 120-gallon.